Ground beef dinners once defined American kitchens in the 1970s. These meals were not optional or occasional. They were the backbone of weeknight cooking, relied on by families who needed food that was filling, affordable, and dependable. Every dish in this video comes from that era, when ground beef stretched paychecks, fed growing households, and showed up on the table without fail. These dinners did not disappear because they failed. They vanished because habits changed, convenience took over, and memory slowly faded. What remains are meals that shaped childhoods, routines, and family tables across the country. This video revisits 10 ground beef dinners that were once everywhere and are now rarely seen. Each one tells us a story of its time, its purpose, and the people who depended on it. Watching to the end matters, because these dishes are more than food. They are pieces of everyday American life that quietly slipped away. In the 1970s, Hamburger Supreme Bake was not a special occasion meal. It was a dependable dinner that showed up when time, money, and energy were limited. This casserole lived in handwritten recipe cards and church cookbooks across America. Ground beef was browned, seasoned simply, and mixed with noodles, sour cream, and canned soup. Nothing about it was fancy, but everything about it worked. Hamburger Supreme Bake mattered because it solved real problems. It could feed a family, stretch leftovers, and reheat without losing its comfort. Mothers relied on it during busy school nights, and fathers expected it to be filling. Children remembered the smell long before they understood the recipe. This dish belonged to an era when casseroles ruled because they were practical. It reflected a time when convenience meant combining what was already in the pantry. There were no substitutions, no garnishes, and no presentation concerns. The goal was simple nourishment and a quiet sense of relief at the table. As decades passed, Hamburger Supreme Bake faded from rotation. Fresh food trends, faster meals, and changing tastes pushed it aside. Yet its absence marks a shift in how families cook and gather. This was not just a casserole, but a system of survival. Remembering it means remembering the rhythm of 1970s kitchens. Ovens hummed, plates chipped, and dinner arrived without ceremony. Hamburger Supreme Bake did not ask for attention, but it earned loyalty. It filled stomachs, quieted evenings, and carried families through another ordinary night. That is why this forgotten dinner deserves to be remembered today. Its story explains how ground beef became a foundation of American home cooking. Without dishes like this, the decade cannot be fully understood. This meal shaped habits, expectations, and memories that still echo at family tables. Its disappearance left quiet space behind. In the 1970s, porcupine meatballs were a familiar sight at American dinner tables. They looked strange, but families trusted them. Ground beef was mixed with uncooked rice, onion, and seasoning, then rolled into firm balls. As they simmered in tomato sauce, the rice pushed outward, creating the spiky look that gave the dish its name. This meal existed for practicality. Rice stretched the beef, making a small amount of meat feed more people. Tomato sauce added moisture, flavor, and warmth without extra cost. Porcupine meatballs simmered slowly on stovetops while homework was finished and chores were done. Dinner did not rush, and neither did this dish. Children watched the meatballs carefully, waiting for the rice to appear. Adults appreciated that the meal required little attention once cooking began. It could be spooned over mashed potatoes or eaten straight from the plate. Leftovers were expected and welcomed. Porcupine meatballs belonged to a generation that cooked with patience and necessity. Recipes were passed by word of mouth, not measurements. Every household made small adjustments, but the purpose stayed the same. Feed everyone, waste nothing, and keep bellies full. As the years passed, the dish slowly disappeared. Quick meals replaced simmering pots, and unfamiliar textures fell out of favor. Today, porcupine meatballs feel unusual to modern kitchens. Yet this dinner tells an honest story. It shows how ground beef was stretched, respected, and relied upon. Porcupine meatballs were not trendy, but they were trusted. They carried families through ordinary evenings, one quiet pot at a time. Remembering this meal matters because it explains a decade of cooking choices and family routines. Without dishes like this, the story of ground beef in American homes feels incomplete and misunderstood. That absence changes how the past is remembered at the table and why these dinners mattered. In the 1970s, Sloppy Joe casserole was born out of routine and repetition. Families loved Sloppy Joes, but loose meat sandwiches did not always stretch far enough. Baking the same flavors into a casserole solved that problem. Ground beef was cooked with onions and tomato sauce, then layered with pasta, bread, or biscuits and baked until firm and filling. This dinner mattered because it turned something messy into something manageable. Parents could cut clean portions, serve seconds easily, and pack leftovers for the next day. The flavor stayed familiar, but the form changed to suit busy households. It was predictable, reliable, and filling in a way sandwiches were not. Sloppy Joe casserole reflected how American kitchens adapted without wasting anything. Day-old bread, leftover noodles, or pantry staples all had a place. Nothing was decorative. Cheese was added only if it was already in the refrigerator. Every ingredient had a job. Children recognized the smell immediately. It meant dinner was close and hunger would be answered. Adults appreciated that one pan could feed everyone without complaints. It baked quietly while kitchens were cleaned and evenings slowed down. As decades passed, casseroles like this one faded from everyday cooking. Individual portions, fast meals, and drive-through dinners replaced shared dishes from the oven. The casserole became a memory instead of a habit. Sloppy Joe casserole was not creative or exciting, but it was dependable. It fed families when schedules were tight and budgets were narrow. Remembering it reveals how ground beef shaped meals that balanced comfort, necessity, and routine. Losing it meant losing a style of cooking built on patience, thrift, and shared tables. In the 1970s, beef and biscuit skillet was a dinner built around timing and trust. It started on the stovetop with ground beef browned slowly, mixed with onions and simple seasoning. A thick gravy followed, made from pantry staples rather than instructions. Once the skillet was ready, canned biscuits were placed on top and baked until the kitchen filled with warmth. This meal mattered because it combined two comforts in one pan. The beef filled stomachs, while the biscuits made the dinner feel complete. Families relied on it during cold evenings and long weeks when energy was low. It required no side dishes and no explanation. One skillet was enough. Children watched the oven, waiting for the biscuits to rise and brown. Adults valued that the meal used inexpensive ingredients and minimal cleanup. It could be served straight from the pan, placed in the center of the table, and shared without ceremony. Leftovers were rare because it was filling and familiar. Beef and biscuit skillet reflected how American kitchens worked at the time. Convenience foods were accepted, but still transformed by hand. Canned biscuits were not shortcuts. They were tools. The goal was not perfection, but reliability. As cooking habits changed, meals like this quietly disappeared. Separate portions replaced shared skillets. Faster options replaced slow baking. The idea of waiting for dinner faded. This dish tells a clear story about ground beef in the 1970s. It was trusted, adaptable, and expected to carry the meal. Beef and biscuit skillet was not celebrated, but it was counted on. It filled evenings with warmth and silence after long days. Remembering this dinner explains how families once gathered around one pan and one purpose. It was food that asked nothing and delivered everything it promised. When it vanished, a small but meaningful rhythm of home cooking vanished with it. In the 1970s, hamburger gravy was a dinner built from necessity rather than preference. Inspired by chipped beef on toast, this version replaced dried beef with ground beef because it was cheaper, easier to find, and more filling. Ground beef was browned, crumbled fine, and folded into a thick white gravy made from milk, flour, and patience. This meal mattered because it stretched almost nothing into something substantial. 1 pound of beef could feed an entire family when served over toast, mashed potatoes, or plain bread. It was common during the end of the week, when paychecks were thin and cupboards were bare. No one questioned it. It was dinner. Hamburger gravy cooked slowly, requiring attention but not complexity. The gravy thickened as the stove warmed the kitchen. Children recognized the smell immediately. It meant full plates and quiet evenings. Adults appreciated that the meal was warm, filling, and inexpensive. There was no effort to dress it up. No herbs, no garnish, no presentation. The goal was to fill stomachs and move on. Plates were wiped clean, not photographed. Seconds were expected. As decades passed, white gravy fell out of favor. Health concerns, changing tastes, and faster meals pushed dishes like this aside. What once felt normal began to feel heavy and old-fashioned. Hamburger gravy slowly disappeared from regular rotation. Yet this dinner explains an important truth about the 1970s kitchen. Ground beef was trusted to do more than taste good. It was expected to solve problems. Hamburger gravy delivered warmth, calories, and comfort when families needed it most. Remembering this dish means remembering a time when food was practical first. Hamburger gravy did not impress anyone, but it carried families through difficult weeks. Its quiet disappearance reflects how everyday survival meals were often forgotten, despite their deep importance. In the 1970s, Spanish rice with hamburger was a dependable skillet dinner found in homes across America. Despite its name, the dish was not tied to tradition or region. It was a practical combination of ground beef, rice, tomatoes, and seasoning cooked together until nothing was wasted and everyone was fed. This meal mattered because it used ingredients families already had. Ground beef provided substance, rice added bulk, and canned tomatoes brought flavor and moisture. Everything cooked in one pan, saving time and cleanup. It was often made in large batches, meant to last more than one night. Spanish rice with hamburger simmered slowly, filling kitchens with a steady smell that signaled dinner was coming. Children recognized it as familiar and filling. Adults appreciated that it reheated well and stayed satisfying. It could be eaten plain, served with bread, or stretched even further the next day. The dish reflected how American cooking borrowed names without borrowing rules. There were no strict recipes. Each household adjusted the seasoning based on taste and availability. The purpose stayed the same: feed everyone without spending more. As cooking trends shifted, this meal faded quietly. Rice dishes became more specialized, and simple skillet dinners were replaced by faster options. What once felt reliable began to feel outdated. Yet Spanish rice with hamburger tells an honest story about ground beef in the 1970s. It was expected to carry flavor, nutrition, and value in one dish. This dinner supported families through ordinary evenings and tight budgets. Remembering it explains how everyday meals shaped routines and expectations. Spanish rice with hamburger was not celebrated, but it was consistent. It filled plates, quieted hunger, and made sure no one went to bed without dinner. When meals like this disappeared, a practical way of cooking disappeared with them. In the 1970s, cheeseburger pie was a weeknight solution that felt almost clever. It delivered the flavor of a cheeseburger without buns, grills, or extra effort. Ground beef was browned, lightly seasoned, and poured into a pie dish. Cheese followed, then a simple batter that baked into a soft crust around the meat. This dinner mattered because it simplified everything. Families wanted familiar flavors, but they also wanted ease. Cheeseburger pie required one pan, basic ingredients, and very little planning. It could be assembled quickly and baked while the rest of the evening moved forward. Children understood it immediately. It tasted like something they already loved, but arrived sliced instead of wrapped. Adults appreciated that it held together, served cleanly, and stretched a pound of beef into multiple portions. Leftovers were easy and often expected. Cheeseburger pie reflected a decade when convenience mixes were embraced, not hidden. Using a boxed batter was not seen as cutting corners. It was seen as practical. The goal was to get dinner on the table without stress or waste. Nothing more was required. As cooking habits changed, this dish slowly disappeared. Burgers became restaurant food. Pies became desserts again. Simple baked dinners lost ground to faster options and individual servings. Cheeseburger pie stopped appearing, even though it had solved a real problem. This meal tells an important story about ground beef in the 1970s. It shows how families adapted popular foods to fit home kitchens and tight schedules. Cheeseburger pie was not exciting, but it was reliable. Remembering it helps explain how dinner once worked. It was predictable, filling, and shared. When meals like this faded away, something steady left with them. Cheeseburger pie did its job quietly and then vanished without notice. In the 1970s, hamburger stroganoff was a practical adaptation of a more sophisticated dish. Families wanted the creamy, comforting taste of beef stroganoff, but ground beef was cheaper and more accessible than tender cuts. The meat was browned, combined with onions, mushrooms, and a simple sauce made from sour cream or condensed soup, and served over noodles that absorbed every bit of flavor. This dinner mattered because it transformed limited ingredients into a satisfying meal. 1 pound of beef could fill multiple plates, and the sauce made even small portions feel indulgent. It was a reliable option for weeknights, when schedules were tight and appetites were large. Children recognized its texture and flavor immediately. Adults valued that it could be prepared in one skillet and reheated easily. The dish required no extra sides, no garnishes, and minimal cleanup. It was practical, comforting, and consistent. Hamburger stroganoff reflected a time when American kitchens relied on improvisation. Recipes were flexible, measured by sight and taste rather than exact instructions. The goal was nourishment and simplicity, not presentation or trendiness. As decades passed, the dish quietly disappeared. Faster meals, frozen entrees, and new tastes replaced it. Hamburger stroganoff became a memory rather than a staple. Remembering this meal shows how ground beef shaped family dinners in the 1970s. It was trusted, adaptable, and filling, carrying households through ordinary evenings. Its absence reflects a shift in how America cooked and gathered at the table. This dish was practical, comforting, and quietly essential, lost, but not forgotten. In the 1970s, stuffed green peppers with ground beef were a weekday favorite in many American kitchens. Unlike the elaborate versions seen in restaurants, this home-cooked version was simple and practical. Bell peppers were hollowed, filled with a mixture of brown ground beef, rice, onions, and canned tomato soup, then baked until tender. This dinner mattered because it stretched ingredients while still feeling wholesome. A small amount of beef could feed a family when combined with rice, and tomato soup added moisture and flavor without extra cost. The peppers held the filling together, making portions predictable and satisfying. Children were drawn to the bright colors on the plate, while adults appreciated the minimal effort required. This dish could be prepared in advance, baked while other chores were completed, and often provided leftovers for the next day. Nothing was wasted, and the meal delivered warmth and comfort at the table. Stuffed green peppers reflected a 1970s approach to home cooking, practical, flexible, and guided by necessity rather than presentation. Recipes were adapted based on what was on hand, creating a sense of resourcefulness in every household. As convenience foods and faster dinners became more popular, stuffed green peppers gradually disappeared from weeknight menus. Modern kitchens rarely see them outside of specialty recipes. Remembering this meal highlights how ground beef shaped everyday dinners. It was trusted to provide nutrition, stretch ingredients, and satisfy appetites. Stuffed green peppers were not luxurious, but they were reliable and meaningful, capturing the rhythm and resourcefulness of American families in the 1970s. Their absence marks the quiet fading of a practical culinary tradition. In the 1970s, American chop suey was a staple in kitchens across the country, though it bore little resemblance to authentic Chinese cuisine. This humble dish combined ground beef, elbow macaroni, and a simple tomato sauce, often enhanced with onions, green peppers, and basic seasonings. It was inexpensive, filling, and cooked entirely in one pot. This dinner mattered because it transformed minimal ingredients into a satisfying meal for the entire family. A single pound of ground beef could feed multiple people when combined with pasta and tomato sauce. It was practical for weeknights, allowed for easy leftovers, and required little attention once cooking began. Children enjoyed its familiar flavors, while adults valued its simplicity and reliability. The dish could be scaled up for larger households or adapted based on what was available in the pantry. No fancy techniques or special ingredients were needed, making it accessible to every family. American chop suey reflected a period when home cooking balanced convenience, affordability, and nourishment. Recipes were flexible, measured by taste rather than precision, and relied on common staples. It was expected, familiar, and trusted. Over time, dishes like this faded from weekly rotation. Fast food, frozen meals, and new cooking trends replaced the one-pot dinners that had once been central to family life. Remembering American chop suey explains why ground beef was indispensable in 1970s kitchens. It was reliable, filling, and comforting. Its disappearance is more than a culinary loss. It represents a shift in the way families cooked, ate, and shared meals. This simple dish carried households through ordinary evenings, leaving memories that endure even after it vanished from tables.